Chapter 22. Gossip Runs Amok. And flying solo on this no beta, so any mistakes are of course my own. I do read over the chapters 3 times, sometimes more, but I know I don't catch everything. If you see something that doesn't make sense or is a plot hole, feel free to tell me. Just a quick explanation, I am having the only 2 traps ready, those being the Cerberus and the mirror. I am thinking that Dumbledore wouldn't think that Gary was quite yet brave enough to go to the Forbidden Corridor, but doesn't want Voldemort to get the stone either. So the mirror is there already. He would have just moved it during Yule, removing the stone first. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP September 3, 1991. It was during the Harry's first break that he heard his first bit of gossip. He was walking down the corridor to the Great Hall to grab one of the snacks that were ever present on the tables when no meals were being served, when he heard Dumbledore's name. So he slowed down and leaned on the wall just around the corner from where he could make out 2 female student voices. "So I heard that Dumbledore is on 2 years probation," said an older female student's voice, whispered in such a way that gossips do, where anyone within 10 feet can hear them quite clearly. "If anything else happens in the school, then he will be retired. They said that since he has been here so long without issue that they are giving him a second chance." "Yeah, that's what I heard too," came the reply. "Did you hear what they found?" "No, tell me." "Well, I heard from Stephen, who heard from Penelope, who heard from Jacob, that they found a Cerberus," the first girl said, in an odd and frightened voice. "No, really, a Cerberus. Why on earth would one of Dose be in the castle?" came the shocked reply. "I don't know, but that's what I heard. Then they said that there was a trapdoor it was guarding. Under the trapdoor was some baby devil's snare. They went down the hall leading away from that and found a room with keys all over the floor. Jacob said it took a while to find the right key to open the door that was at the end," said the first person. You could hear the excitement in her voice. "What a den! Well, inside the door was a large room with a chessboard in it. It looked like it was growing. So they walked past it and found an empty room. They went into the next chamber, and fire came up from the floor on both sides. But that's all there was. A freeze flame spell later, and they came to the last chamber, and in the middle was a large mirror. Do they know what I were for? Yeah, one of the Auras looked in it, and suddenly he had the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket. So he took it to Madam Bones, and from what I heard, she was as angry as a wet cat. I heard she chewed the headmaster out, but good, and she took the stone and was going to send it back to the Flamels. I hope she gets it to them before the Unspeakables come for it. I would hate to see them." The first person's voice trailed off, and Harry could hear them walking away as their voices got harder to hear, and their footsteps echoed faintly in the hall. With a smirk on his face, Harry turned and went to his next class. He couldn't wait to tell Gary. Meanwhile, Gary was hearing his own bit of gossip. "So Susan told me that her aunt told her that Minister Fudge, even though he saw it with the rest of us, is stating that the wraith we saw wasn't he, who must not be named. He said it was impossible, that you know who was dead and couldn't come back," Parvati said, in that same gossip whisper to Lavender. "Did he say what he thought it was?" "Yeah, get this. He's trying to blame Dumbledore. He said something about the headmaster setting it all up to scare the public. Like that makes any sense," the Indian girl snorted. While her family didn't like the balmy old man, she didn't think he would stoop so low as to scare a room full of students. Besides, she saw what she saw, and the Potter twins confirmed it from their mother, who was standing right in front of Quirrell when it happened. "Well, everyone knows that Dumbledore has been saying for years that you know who isn't dead. So I can see where the new minister might think that. Not that I'm saying it's true," Lavender said quickly, holding up her hands at Parvati's indignant look. "Just that I can understand," she ended with a shrug. Just then, Professor Flitwick called the classes to attention and started his lecture on the color-changing spell they would start tomorrow. It was in their joint class of herbology that they heard what the board decided to do with Professor Watts. They were still repotting snapdragons, because Professor Sprout wanted them to be able to do it without getting bit, and then they'd move on. "Did you guys hear what the board decided about the new ghost?" Mandy asked in an undertone. All heads within hearing range glanced her way. Not wanting to be bit by their plants, they only gave her part of their attention, which didn't help as you could hear one or two ows coming from around the table. "No," said Harry in a soft voice. "What did they say?" The closest students leaned forward as much as their plants would let them. "So I heard some upper years saying that some of the board attended her class of fifth years. She's still doing the same lecture. I guess she thinks it's important that everyone knows. Anyway, they were there and some of them questioned her on where she got her information. When she could cite 3 different books, they decided that she knew what she was talking about and welcomed her to the staff. I heard that the headmaster was very upset by this. I also heard that it was one of the reasons he was put on probation, because while he didn't hide it, it wasn't something the board knew when he was hired. If it hadn't been for years of good service, they would have fired him on the spot, Mandy said, as softly and quickly as possible, not wanting to lose points for talking in class. Harry nodded his head, indicating that he heard, and with another inner smirk went back to his assignment. It would be lunch soon, and then study time. He would mental talk to Gary then. They didn't like to do it while classes were in session, in case someone was doing something dangerous. They were still working on being able to mental chat and concentrate on the outside world at the same time. The Weasley twins made it look easy. Blast them. It was during study hall that Professor McGonagall came to Gary with a note stating that the headmaster wanted to see him. "Professor, is it possible for you and Harry to join me? My mum doesn't want me to see the headmaster unattended because he tried to take me away when I was little," Gary said, putting a little bit of fear in his bright green eyes. He was hoping that his head of house knew the history between the Potters and the old man. "I don't see a problem with me coming with you, Mr. Potter. However, your brother was not invited, so I'm going to have to decline that part of your request," she answered, her lips pursed. As much as she admired Dumbledore, she never approved of him trying to separate the Potter twins. "I guess that'll have to do, ma'am. Thank you," the younger twin stated with a nod of his head. He got up and gathered his books and papers. He then said his goodbyes to the mutineers, who were looking on in various states of confusion and worry. He left to a chorus of "see ya, later-s," and "keep calms" as he followed his professor out of the hall. Harry said in his head, "Pull up your occlumency." Student and professor continued silently through the halls to the 3rd floor where they came upon a gargoyle. The Transfiguration professor gave the password of Toffee Eclair, and the stone statue moved aside, revealing a winding staircase. The stairs moved on their own, and soon the two were at the top. "Enter," came the gentle voice of Dumbledore. "Ah, Minerva and Mr. Potter, come in, come in. Thank you, Professor, for seeing Gary here. You may go now," he said from behind his large and cluttered desk. "Gary, my boy, take a seat. Would you like a lemon sherbet?" he asked, waving to the chairs in front of his desk, and then to the dish of candy that was on the corner of said desk. "No, thank you. I just had some biscuits in the great hall," the messy-haired boy answered. "Mr. Potter has asked me to be here," McGonagall stated, her lips thinning, as if waiting for Dumbledore to contradict her. "And with the history of your interaction with his family, I don't blame him." "I will be staying," she said in finality. "Very well," conceded the headmaster, though you could tell by the dimming of his eyes he was not happy. But there was very little he could do. She was his head of house and had every right to be there. The professor and student took the seats indicated in front of the desk. "Now, Gary, tell me how your first few days of Hogwarts had been. Are you happy you came?" the old man asked. Gary could feel the brush on his mind, but chose to ignore it. Although he did look away from the man's twinkling blue eyes and settled on looking at his bushy eyebrows, which furrowed with the shields that met his legitimacy. "Oh, yes, sir. Me and Harry are having a lovely time being with all our friends. We're very happy to finally be able to study magic. The Muggle school was so helpful in us learning to study harder and learn faster. All of us are extremely happy to be here," Gary gushed like the 11-year-old he was. It was part of the plan to portray themselves as young as possible. It would throw the old man off and make him think that Gary would be easy to control. "Indeed," Dumbledore said, in a slightly strained voice. He had not been in the study hall, so he didn't know that all of the mutineers were studying together. He had hoped to break up that group when they all got sorted into different houses. "Well, that is indeed wonderful. I am delighted to know that you are not letting the tradition of separation of houses waylay you. I did wonder if you would be joining the Quidditch team next year. I hear your brother is also very good on a broom. It is likely you will both be chosen for your house teams." He figured he would start small, maybe set it up so Gary would get on the team this year, and then Harry would get jealous of his brother, and the rift could start from there. "Oh no, sir, I have no ambition to be on the Gryffindor team. Even if for some reason I was offered to play this year, I'd have to turn it down," Gary said with a vigorous shaking of his head. "Studying is much more important," he said solemnly. "Well, that is very smart of you, my boy." The voice got tighter still. Silence entered the room. The only noise heard was the snoring of the paintings that hung behind the desk. "Well, Headmaster, if that is all I have homework to complete." "Should I tell my friends you're going to call them up too? Wouldn't want them to think you're treating me special or anything," Gary asked, with as innocent a look on his face that he could pull off while laughing inside. He peeked to the right and saw his head of house's lips quirk. "Alas, my boy, I am a very busy man. You may tell your friends that I inquired about them through you." The old man sighed, his shoulder slumped slightly with defeat. "Okay, sir. Thanks for seeing me. Goodbye." And with that, Gary and McGonagall left. Gary mentally relayed what happened to Harry, and they both had a good chuckle. It was good to see their tactics working. Chapter 23. More Rumors Help. And flying solo on this, no beta. So any mistakes are of course my own. I do read over the chapter 3 times, sometimes more, but I know I don't catch everything. If you see something that doesn't make sense or is a plot hole, feel free to tell me. And yeah, I didn't add anything to the last chapter, go me. Anyway, another filler chapter that will confirm more rumors and what other people are doing. I am trying to keep everything in the Potter's point of view, and all but one conversation that I recall so far has done that. So everything you hear will be second or third hand. Disclaimer: I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP September 17, 1991, Potter Manor. The hunters gathered together to discuss where they were on their searches and research. Sitting in the dining room with high tea served, they all got comfortable, and James started the meeting. "Okay, welcome everyone. Let's get started, shall we? Augusta, why don't you go first and tell us what you've heard so far, and when you're done, Lily and I might have something to add that could give you a helping hand in your goss." Tease, James said from the head of the table. It had been decided that he would be the commander of this group, mostly because he was the one to start the whole thing all those years ago, when he got all the kids together, and he and his wife kept everyone together when times got rough. "Well, so far, most of the people I have talked to have not made the connection that you know who and Tom Riddle. I have tried to show it to them, but they are not listening, and when you know who came back from wherever he went, he didn't look like Riddle anymore. All that dark magic, you know. Since I have no evidence, then I cannot sway them. I do not know if it is fear or senility, but they are being hard-headed," the oldest Longbottom said with an exasperated sigh. She had had such high hopes of being helpful, but she was being met with resistance that she hadn't anticipated. "And here is where we might help. Did Neville tell you about the new history professor?" James asked, and waited for her to either confirm or deny. When she nodded her head that her grandson had, the messy-haired man continued. "Well, she gave a lecture about Riddle last week, told the whole student body who he was. In that lecture, she cited 2 books that confirmed what she was saying. One was Legend of the Founders and Who They Sired, which is a self-updating family tree of sorts for all 4 founders. And the other was Paths of the Dark Lords and Ladies, which, as the title suggests, is a history of all the Europe's Dark Lords and Ladies, including, of course, the most recent. So you might want to pick up a copy of these 2 and carry it with you to your teas," he finished with a smirk. "Oh my, yes, that will be very helpful indeed," Augusta said with a titter, glad to finally have something to back her gossip up. "Lily, what news do you have for us?" he asked, turning to his wife. "Well, off subject for a minute, I heard from Severus that Malfoy SR contacted him and wanted to see if they could find a way to get the dark mark off their arms. He asked if I could look into it when I have the time. I told him I would do what I could," she answered, ignoring the marauders. She was quite used to them making faces whenever her friend's name was mentioned. However, since they never did anything about their dislike, she let them be. "I thought we should know that there are some Death Eaters not willing to bow before the bastard when he returns, and while I don't believe for a minute they will turn good, it will still be one less person to face in a war," she finished with a shrug. Right, well, that's good, I guess. Anyway, how is the research coming? James asked quickly to get away from that touchy subject. We're close to finding what we need to rid the containers of their soul pieces. That powder you two used on Quirrell is a good start, Albert answered enthusiastically. He was happy with how far they had come. They had even utilized the Potter's computers in their research and found a few fantasy sites that might be helpful. Who knew Muggle fantasy was so close to wizardry? That's wonderful, James said, slapping his hand on the table, also getting excited. That would be a big step in protecting the kids and making the dark bastard easier to take down. He then turned to the three hunters that weren't marauders simply named Team 1. Have you guys found anything or heard anything? Not yet, came the frustrated reply from Keaton, but we really didn't have anything to go on. Now that we know where Riddle came from, thanks to those books, we have a place to start. We'll continue in Little Hangleton tomorrow. Is the crystal working for you then? Sirius asked, leaning forward. He wanted to know because he had made the copy crystal, since Lily was doing her own thing and they hadn't decided to split up until after the first meeting. Yeah, Wayne S.R. said, pulling out the crystal and an object that looked normal, but when he placed it on the table, the crystal vibrated. We took it around my house and discovered a hidden compartment in one of the walls. Someone, at one time, had put this dark artifact in it. I never even knew it was there. It's not mentioned in any of the family journals, so that was disturbing, but a good test. He put both items back in his satchel. It was something to take care of outside of this meeting. Great, Sirius said, and clapped his hands together once, then rubbed them in anticipation. My turn. It seems that dear old Mum left a portrait on the wall of Grimold Place, and it has been giving orders to the old house elf named Creature. When we went to check the house out, the damn thing tried to attack me. Me, its master. Well, that didn't go over well. Anyway, I gave it the order that it was never to come within 100 feet of me, Remus or you Potters. That's all I figured I'd get away with. Then I banned it from the house and told it to go to Narcissa and stay with her family, he said with a cackle. He really hated his family, and that vile creature was just as bad. He took a deep breath to start again, but was stopped by Remus. Anyway, Remus interrupted his friend's tangent, we went to the house, used the crystal, and found a Horcrux. There were gasps heard from the unexpected news, and then they all started talking as one about what should be done with it and where to store it. Wait, stop. Come on, guys, settle down, or we'll never get anything decided, James said, standing up, raising his voice to be heard and rapping his knuckles on the table. He waited until everyone quieted down and then sat and sighed. Okay, that's an oversight on our part. We never figured out what to do with these things when we found them. Suggestions? Well, at first I thought we could put them in the magic null rooms, but that might cause the soul pieces to separate and join the main soul. I don't think we want that to happen, Gifford said. He had been quiet until now, mostly taking in and thinking about all the news that everyone was bringing to the table. You're probably right, Lily said with a sigh. Maybe a lead box. That might work, but where would we get one? Not much call for them in the wizard world. If you are seen buying one, then you are marked as someone with something to hide, Sirius said, and he would know growing up as he did. Lily waved his concerns off. Really, Padfoot, you should know by now that what you can't get in the magic world you can always find easier in the non-magical. I'll take care of it. Until then, let's wrap it up and put it in the freezer. I have one more thing to say before we break up for the night. Amelia wants in. She said after the fiasco of the first day of school, she no longer cares what Dumbledore thinks, Albert said, having been the one she approached at the ministry. I think it would be a good idea. I don't know. She was pretty harsh on us up until that point, James said with a shake of his head. Don't get me wrong, I like Amelia, but we were warned to keep an eye out for her, that she didn't trust us. That may be so, but did you ever think that is because she is an aura and they hate not being told something? I know you had your reasons, and I agree with them, but the tide has changed, and we can't afford to make an enemy out of someone that high up in the ministry, Albert argued, determined to make them see they needed all the allies and supporters they could get. Yes, it was a large, strong group they had, but if war came, then they would be fighting, literally, the dark, and figuratively, the light. Two sides, so no one could really be turned down. I think, said Remus considerately, we should all take oaths. In this case, it is not a matter of trust. It is a matter of not letting history repeat itself. Everyone remember how much we trusted Peter. It was a statement. There was no question in that sentence. Angry and thoughtful looks filtered around the table as everyone remembered the traitor. Nods were given, and soon an oath was drawn, and everyone around the table took it. History would not be repeated in this group. Okay, sighed Lily, bringing the topic back to Amelia. If she takes the same oath, then we'll bring her in. Who knows, she might be helpful. She does have connections that we don't. So it was agreed, and the group idly chatted for a while, and then broke up and returned to their homes. Short narrative on what was happening at Hogwarts. It had been a rough 2 weeks for the Potter twins. Somehow, and they were sure how, but couldn't prove it, it had gotten out that Gary would turn down playing Quidditch, so he wouldn't upset his non-celebrity twin. This had different reactions among the student population. Some were glad that he wasn't an attention seeker who used his fame to break the rules. The Gryffindor team, sans the Weasley twins who stood by Gary, was upset that he wouldn't play. Oliver Wood was adamant that Gary should give up on his studies and join. His twins' feelings be damned. Unfortunately, for the keeper, he said it in front of McGonagall, who promptly told him if she ever heard him again try and bully anyone on to the team, he would be kicked off and put on academic probation. Other teams, after hearing that the Potter twins were that good on a broom, were glad he didn't want to play. They had enough competition with the Slytherins cheating all the time. Though they did try and talk to Harry about joining the Ravenclaw team, however, that house was more sympathetic to his want to study, so they understood when he said no. Both boys said if they did well this year on their end-of-the-year tests, they might try out next year. That seemed to placate everyone. It was also through the valiant efforts of Parvati and Lavender that these rumors were turned around in their favor. The study group had grown. Daphne and Tracy had brought the 12 half-bloods of all years they found in the Slytherin house to the group. Susan and Hannah had brought a few upper years and most of the first years of Hufflepuff. All of the first-year Ravenclaws and some of their upper years joined in, because, hey, it was a study group. A few more studious Gryffindors also joined in. None of them were part of the core group of the mutineers, just sat at the table with them to complete homework. Sadly, this brought about the split of Ron and Seamus from the group. Ron was highly upset that his friend wouldn't give up studying to play for the team, and Seamus followed along with his best friend. They never noticed that they could no longer talk about the mutineers. They only knew there was a study group they didn't want anything to do with. It made the Gryffindor dorm room a frosty place to be. Dean was torn between joining the larger group or sectioning himself off with a smaller group. After a week, he decided that, though he enjoyed sports as much as the next guy, he needed to pass his classes more. It would make his mum happy. Hermione hadn't liked the fact that she was not able to help most of the people in the study group, and so befriended Ron and Seamus, who needed a lot of help, which saddened Gary, because they could always use smart people in their quest. The Weasley twins and Percy were studying with the group. The Fred and George took the Potter twins aside and said they wanted in on the side group they knew the mutineers had. The boys said they would bring it up with the rest of the mutineers and take a vote. Susan approached them for the same reason and was told the same thing. With all these added people, they took up an entire table. It was quite a feat to keep the large group on track with studying. Sally kept them up to date on the movements of Voldemort via her minions. After what happened in the Great Hall, she had ordered them to question any magical person passing over that came from the UK to try and track him down. He was staying in Britain, for now, probably hoping to find one of the more susceptible Death Eaters to help him regain a body. Now that the stone had been returned to the Flamels, who quickly disappeared, that avenue was closed to him. Mirror and crystals were used every night by a large part of the student body, and Dumbledore was finding it harder to manipulate anyone. Since the crystals were a form of guided self-help meditation, more and more of what used to be sheep were now becoming free thinkers and were finally seeing that maybe, just maybe, the headmaster was getting too old to be in charge. HPHPHP, and another quick filler chapter. I am still debating on adding an additional trial for first year or keeping it like this. Thanks to Philosophize, whose review inspired this chapter. Chapter 24, Halloween. And thanks to my betas, Daryl Deem and Alex 33, checking this over. All mistakes are my own, especially since I have a bad habit of adding things and not sending it back to them. Disclaimer. I don't own anything related to Harry Potter. That privilege belonged to J.K. Rowling and all those who she lets make money for her. HPHPHP October 31, 1991. Halloween was a time for celebration with the Potter family. They felt this was the day that they survived and became a stronger family for it. They also knew that it was the day that they gained a very special friend in Sally. So when the day started, the Potter twins delved into it with gusto. They attended their classes and had trouble sitting still. They were so excited. They would chat with their parents and Sally this night and share stories about years gone by. It was an annual tradition. It was at lunch that a kink came up that made the excitement a little less. A special edition of the Daily Prophet came with the headline, "The Boy Who Lived Turns Down Quidditch for Lesser Brother" by Rita Skeeter. The article that followed blasted the Potters for the way they raised a selfish child and made the reader think that Gary didn't care about anyone else except Harry. It was written in such a way that it made you think that you would turn on your own family if necessary, and that their boy hero wouldn't. Rita had a way of twisting words to make you feel as if you should be more important than anything else, and that celebrities should be thinking of only you and not their fame or family. It had quotes, all anonymous of course, that stated that Gary was a stuck-up brat that only thought of himself and Harry. This was only a minor bump in their day. The twins knew that their parents would sue the pants off this woman, and the suit would make her look like a liar. Gary looked around the hall and could see that a large majority of the student body were outraged on Gary's behalf. He could only think that it was thanks to Pandora's crystals that they were thinking for themselves and not being led like sheep. Wow, she is really going to get in trouble for this one, Gary thought to his brother. He could feel Harry laughing his arse off through the link. You should hear what Padma is saying. That girl could peel rust of a pipe with the words coming out of her mouth, Harry sent back, still laughing. Look at Dumbledore. He looks happy about this. I'll bet he was the one to leak the story. Too bad he probably did it via an unsigned letter and we'll never know. Gary looked at the staff table, and Dumbledore did indeed have a smug look about him. Headmaster turned his gaze to Gary, and his face morphed into one of pity, like he was feeling bad about the article instead of satisfied. So Gary gave him a hurt look, like the paper had did what the headmaster was hoping for and made a dent in his bond with Harry. If he looks at you, try and look weak and pathetic, and that you feel guilty for holding me back. Yeah, I can do that, came Harry's smug reply, and his face took on such a look, to the confusion of the mutineers around him. He just shook his head slightly and lipped later, so they would understand. These actions actually garnered them more support. The students that saw the forlorn faces of the twins felt that the poor boys were being prosecuted unfairly and swore they would try and make them feel more welcome. The article had a strange effect on the Gryffindor and Ravenclaw Quidditch team captains, making them feel guilty of trying to cause a rift between the two firsties. There, of course, were some that supported the article 100% and felt that their hero should give up everything to protect them and not worry about some useless brother. Some people took sports far too seriously. The rest of the day was spent fending off supporters on both sides. Gary was getting tired of having to defend himself. He was happy to hear Hermione berate Ron and Seamus for thinking exactly what Rita wanted them to. It was sad that someone who had been his friend for so long could think so little of him and his family. He had to wonder just what was said between the parents in the Weasley household that could make such an impression on their kids. They were like complete opposites. The Weasley twins were supporters of the Potters, and Ron and Percy were supporters of Dumbledore. Even if Percy studied with them, he still spouted off that Dumbledore was the greatest wizard of the age. To Gary, it only made sense that the adults in that house were equally divided. If he had to guess, it was Mr. Weasley that thought that maybe the Potters were right, and his wife would be the one taking the headmaster's side. Gary just hoped it wasn't important enough to split that family completely. Harry was equally as tired of play acting for the Dumbledore followers in the school. He was happy that the mutineers defended the twins, right to choose what they wanted, and the rest of the wizarding world could just bugger off. Study hall was a noisy affair, and very little work got done. Gary slipped out early so he could get some peace and quiet and was wandering the halls when it came to him that Rita must have been in the school, yet he never saw her. Being the smart boy he automatically figured out that the woman was an animagus and made a mental note to tell all the mutineers to check their maps daily to keep a lookout for her. He was pulled from his thoughts when he heard his name called. "Potter," came a male voice from behind. Gary's hand was at the ready to cast a defensive, wandless spell, if needs must. He turned to the voice and saw an upper-ear Slytherin approaching him. The boy stood a good 2 heads above Gary. He had dark hair and eyes, his face chiseled, giving him a hard appearance and making him look threatening, making Gary more cautious. He had nothing against Slytherins, but he knew that some of them were not to be trusted. "Yeah?" Gary asked, trying to look innocent, his hands still charged with magic just in case. "Forgive me if I startled you. I just wanted to introduce myself and give you a belated welcome to Hogwarts. I was hoping that we could be friends." "My name is Adam Goddard. Pleased to meet you," the older boy said, holding out his hand. Gary looked on the young man's face and saw no falsehoods, so he released the magic back into himself, relaxed, and took the offered hand. "Gary Potter, glad to make your acquaintance," he said with confidence as he shook with the boy, much like he had with Draco, in a firm, businesslike manner, making sure to speak formally. "I would like it if we were at least not enemies. However, due to my very unwanted status, I am ever cautious about making instant friends. You are more than welcome to join our study group, and if you get along with everyone else, you will be welcome to the Potters as a friend of the family." Being the pure blood that Adam was, he knew just what the young man was saying about making immediate friends. It was much the same as his father told him over the years. So he shook the hand in the same manner and nodded his head in understanding. "I will be more than happy to take you up on that offer. I wanted to make sure that you knew that not all Slytherins were out to get you, and that some of us would like to be in your group. We feel that the house rivalry has gone on long enough. Some of us know that it has not always been such and want it to go back to the way it was before this great rift started." Adam stated, hoping to convey that not all Slytherins were evil like the rest of the school thought. To his surprise, Gary chuckled. Gary shook his head to ward off the hurt he could see in the upper ear's face and said in a much more casual tone, "No, no, I'm not laughing at you. But didn't you notice that there are over 15 of your housemates in our study group? We welcome all students as long as they get on well with one another. Hey, do you have one of the guided meditation crystals? I can hook you up with one if you want," he said, as a peace offering for laughing at the boy. "No," my father felt they were useless. "However, I would be more than happy to take you up on that." "Sure thing. Come to the study group tomorrow, bring your friends, and I'll have a few I keep handy as gifts," Gary offered and gave a final nod of his head and said, "I have to get back to the group. They'll send out a search party for me sooner or later. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me. To tell you the truth, from what the paper was saying, I didn't think it would be this easy," Adam replied, and with a nod of his head. He then turned and went back the way he came. Well, that was different, Gary thought to himself, and with a shake of his head started back to the great hall. It was later that night that the feast began. The tables were laden down with all sorts of sugary treats, all made to look festive. There were ladies' fingers with sugar bandages, pumpkins filled with candy, grape eyeballs that moved, witches' hats that laughed, candy made to move like bugs, orange spiced biscuits shaped like pumpkins and bats, the occasional fruit bowl made to look like wiggling body parts, chicken legs made to look like zombie legs, ham cut in the shape of jack-o'-lanterns, pasta made to look like either snakes or worms, and other Halloween-styled food. All this moving food was disconcerting for the muggle-raised, but seeing the wizard-raised not batting an eye at it, they soon relaxed. The hall was decorated with large jack-o'-lanterns instead of candles. Bats were seen in the light of the sky like ceiling, and every ghost in the castle was wandering about the tables telling tales of Halloween's past. Children's laughter filled the air. Stories of deceased relatives were passed along, as it was wizard custom to honor the dead on this night. The magic was so encompassing that everyone could feel its warm embrace. The castle seemed to literally sing with the song of happiness. All in all, it was a magical night. After the feast, the headmaster stood to give a speech. He waited until all heads turned his way and started. "Now that we have eaten our fill, a toast to Gary Potter, who on this night rid us of an evil dark lord," he said, and raised his glass towards Gary. Gary blushed, shook his head, stood and held his hands up to stop the cheering. No, don't toast me. I didn't do anything that warrants it. If you must toast anyone, toast my mum. It was she that cast the spell to protect the children she loves. Toast the people who died in that war. Toast the people who fought in that war. Toast the citizens who rallied together to support the Auras. Toast the Auras whose jobs it was to protect everyone in the wizarding world. But don't toast a child that did nothing but sit in his crib and simply didn't die, he said in his loudest, most passionate voice, conveying that he meant every word he uttered. As one, the mutineers all stood and raised their glasses to the dead. Slowly others followed, and soon statements such as to Mrs. Potter who, and to my Uncle Stuart who, or to my mum, Alexia Bones who died, filled the air, and toast were made to those living and past. Gary nodded his head and joined in, glancing at the very disgruntled headmaster, and internally smirked. After the toasting was done, a strange music surrounded the great hall. Everyone looked around to see where it was coming from. Then in the front of the staff table, 22 ghosts appeared. Some were recognized as relatives that were killed in the war. Others wore clothes or uniforms of old. You could see battle wounds and reasons for death on all of them, though none too gruesome. The ghosts were formed in tiers, like a choir, and they started to sing. They sang about love and devotion to family. They sang about wars gone by. They sang and sang until smiles and tears were on most everyone's faces. Their voices were so beautiful that none of the staff tried to stop them. Harry and Gary noted that Sally was standing in front of the choir waving a baton and guiding them. They would ask her later what was going on. After the choir was done, the spirits that had family in the student body moved off to join them. The others dispersed around the hall and talked to whoever asked them a question. Dumbledore was talking to Professor Watts, trying to find out how these ghosts appeared in his castle. Since they came the same way she did, he felt she would know. He regretted the fact that he couldn't read the minds of ghosts. Professor Watts just kept shaking her head and stating she had nothing to do with it. Soon enough, the feast ended and the students went to their dorms, all excitedly chatting about what occurred. After doing his nighttime rituals, Gary went to his bed, cast a silencing charm, got his mirror out and activated the security. One can never be too careful. Harry Potter. What's up, Gary? His brother said, appearing in the mirror, in much the same manner of dress. Did you know Sally was going to do that? Gary asked as he nestled down into his pillows. It had been a long day. No. A clue. She isn't there with you. Nope. I was hoping she was there with you since it is your night. That's why I'm on the mirror. I wanted to ask her what the ghosts were all about, he answered. I wonder if she's keeping those new ghosts here. Harry asked, also snuggling into his pillows. Don't know, I hope so. Maybe she is thinking they could be spies for us, Gary said thoughtfully. And you would be correct, Sally said as she appeared sitting cross-legged on Gary's bed. Are all of them from this past war? Harry asked. No, some of them are from Grindelwald's war. They wanted to come and confirm what Isabel is teaching you guys. There are even some who knew Tom when he was here in Hogwarts, she replied, bouncing in place, making her pigtails bob up and down, reminding Gary what he wanted to talk to her about. Hey, Sally, I was wondering, do you always look like a 6-year-old? I can change my appearance to whatever I want. Oh, I was thinking you could, age with me and Harry. Or even a few years older. I mean, I love you to death, no pun intended, but it is hard to take training serious when you're taking orders from a 6-year-old girl, Gary said quickly, hoping he didn't offend her. Sally got a thoughtful look on her adorable little face and slowly aged right before Gary's eyes. She still looked like an innocent child, but now appeared to be the age of the twins. Her tiny pigtails grew longer and didn't bob quite as much. Her dress, while still in a baby doll style, became longer in the skirt and straighter in the blouse, not quite as many ruffles. Her shoes and stocking remained the same. How's that? She asked with a cute little scrunch of her nose. Much better. Now I feel like you're equal to me, and I'm not beating up some little kid, Gary answered, and turned the mirror so Harry could see the changes. Yeah, Harry added his 2 nuts worth. You look like someone I'd date, if I was old enough. His cheeks reddened with embarrassment. Sally just laughed and shook her head. You mean if I was young enough? Remember, even though I look 11, I'm as old as the earth, she said, reminding them just who she was. The boys nodded sagely, and Gary brought the topic back to the ghosts. So those new guys are your spies. he asked with a tilt of his head. Yup, they wanted to come back and look after the kids. They said if Isabel was given the chance they wanted one as well. I tried sending Moaning Myrtle on, but she wanted to stay. I did learn some of her secrets, though. I'm going to have Isabel give a lecture on those tidbits of information next year, she replied with a conspiring wink. Not fair, came the twin replies. You can't give us info like that and then make us wait. That's cruel. Too bad you're just going to have to wait until next year, she said smugly. The two boys talked for a while and then signed off to call their parents. Gary called his mum and Harry his dad. They told the Potters what happened during the day and were told that yes, they were going after Skeeter. And yes, their solicitor told them she was in violation of the restraining order and she would more than likely get a fine and some jail time. They also told the boys that their rebuttal was already on the way to the Prophet and the Quibbler, and they were going to do an interview with the Wizarding Wireless. They all talked until midnight, and when the witching hour approached, they gave thanks to the dead, then signed off, started their crystals, and went to sleep. HPHPHPN. Since I am now making this up as I go any, and all suggestions are welcome. But please remember I am keeping the story in the Potter's point of view. Everything you hear about other people will be in either from them having conversation with them or third-hand knowledge. Also, I am not a reporter and feel funny trying to write like one. But if you want to write an article based of the paragraph that follows the headlines, I will make sure you get credit for it if I use it. Something to think about.